Hi guys, it is 2023, and in case you haven't heard, we can now order anything that we want delivered to eat and have it immediately delivered without ever leaving our couch. We can complete a full day of work or trade in a car online without ever putting on real pants. Let's say you do want to leave the house. You can have curbside pickup where you don't even get out of your car and whatever you ordered gets brought directly to your vehicle. And let's say you're going somewhere and you don't have a car or you don't want to drive. Don't worry, the rideshare apps have you covered. They'll be there within minutes. Now, we live in a golden age of convenience, made possible by the advent of the internet and expedited by the COVID-19 pandemic. This golden age of convenience has made life easier for everyone who can afford the relatively marginal fees. But there is a subset of the population for which this age of convenience is more than a convenience. Who? Well, people with disabilities. So there are now millions of additional Americans who can independently access local goods, services, and places without having to risk their health or safety or rely on anybody else. As a disabled person, I can tell you this has been a game changer. Now, you may have just heard me say disabled and you're thinking like, aren't we supposed to say people with disabilities? I'll let you know a secret. Disabled is actually not a bad word because being disabled is not a bad thing. And that probably ought to be its own separate TED Talk. But what I'll tell y'all now is when you meet a person in the disability community, ask which they prefer. The rest of the time you can use either. Anyway, back to your regularly scheduled programming. So, personally, I am autistic, and what that means is that among other things, I'm particularly prone to sensory overload. Now, the worst trigger for me has always been grocery stores. So, think about the hundreds of colors, sizes, shapes, logos, and packages. They go from your feet to up above your head in these tight winding rows. And then there's the grocery carts. Oh my gosh, the grocery carts. So they roll over your feet and they make that squeaking sound with the wheels, and it is utterly overwhelming. So I hate grocery stores. And they've always been a source of panic attacks for me. They're incredibly overwhelming. And what I used to do was look at my own calendar and figure out when am I going to be the most resilient and have the most energy and be able to handle this, and cross-reference it with when you would expect a grocery store to be busy. And I would go with the like 1 or 2 little windows in that week that meant I probably wouldn't have a panic attack. Well, now, with the advent of grocery delivery, I can just order what I need when I need it and have it brought out to my vehicle or delivered to my home. This has been a revolution. And it's not just for me. There are millions of people with disabilities for which convenience services have been far more than a convenience. They have truly been an accessibility revolution. Let's think through a couple of those cases. So first, we've got a blind woman. So I want you to imagine that this woman has been invited out for drinks with some friends. She, in 2023, can order a rideshare. It can be there within minutes. It can help her get where she's going, and at the end of the night, it can get her back home without having to rely on anyone else to help her get around. Or, what about someone who's immunocompromised? Imagine a cancer patient who cannot safely go into a big box store and interact with all of the people and things and germs that are in that space, but can place an order and have it safely placed in his trunk and then be on with his day. Or think about a wheelchair user who's pre-ordered a meal at a restaurant. He can have that order brought to him in the driver's seat in a minute versus spending 20 minutes unloading his chair, trying to get inside to get it, coming back out, reloading his chair, and then being able to go on. So when you think about these use cases, I think there's another question you have to ask yourself. We've considered the inordinate positive effect that convenience services have had on people with disabilities. But doesn't that also mean that when convenience services fail to be delivered as promised, that there is an inordinate negative effect? Particularly when those services have already been arranged and then are not fulfilled the way they're expected to be. It's not just a matter of convenience, it is a matter of accessibility. Now, let's think about that in the case of the 3 people we just met a moment ago. So, we have our friend who is blind. She can't drive a vehicle, but she's going to go meet her friends for drinks. And her app is telling her, your ride will be here in 5 minutes. Oh, delayed 2 minutes. Delayed 10 minutes. Delayed 20 minutes. Oh, we're so sorry. Your ride has been canceled. Good luck finding another one. Now, most of us would hop in our cars and drive, we'd pay the parking fee, we'd refrain from drinking, but we'd get there. She can't do that. Getting in her own car, not a choice. And even though public transport is theoretically accessible, it's not available everywhere, and it is almost always harder to navigate for people with disabilities. Okay, so what about our immunocompromised cancer patient? He shows up to the store, and he sees a sign that says, "Sorry, short-staffed today, curbside pickup is unavailable, but you can come inside and get your order." Okay, well, most of us, we do just that. We'd roll our eyes, huff a little bit, and go inside, get our order, bring it back to our car, load it up and go. But if he's not able to somehow get on the phone with the right person and convince them to please bring his order out because he can't come in and get it, he's just going to have to leave without it. And finally, I want you to imagine the restaurant patron who's a wheelchair user. Now, he may ultimately be able to get his order, right? But that's going to entail transferring from the driver's seat to his chair, getting the back of his vehicle open, lowering the ramp, unloading his wheelchair, reloading the ramp and closing the vehicle, going inside to get his food, coming back out, opening it back up, relowering the ramp again, reloading the chair, and then transporting himself back to the driver's seat. That is not equal access. And it begs the question, that extensive time and energy, that's not something that we can accept. We have to ask ourselves, who do we really believe that convenience services are for? Now, if these services really only exist for the convenience of non-disabled people, then they can be interrupted with extracurricular impact. We would expect it sometimes, and it will be an inconvenience, but it'll happen. That's fine. But if they are accommodations, in fact, I dare say when they are accommodations, for the people who are using them as a gateway to independence, to access to those local goods, places, services, they have to be delivered with higher fidelity. Companies have an ethical obligation to provide their services with reliability, particularly when they have already been ordered, reserved, promised. Because that's a promise that that person with the disability is relying on. Now, if the ethical argument is not enough for you, maybe you're thinking, I don't know, is this still worth it? Companies should also be considering the legal argument. So if you're familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, when it comes to accommodations, they have a clear rule. Covered entities, places like shops and restaurants, have an obligation to make reasonable accommodations to their policies, practices, and procedures, sometimes even their physical spaces, unless it would necessitate a fundamental alteration to the nature of the business. Now, that's fancy lawyer speak for the fact that the US government expects US businesses to make changes they can to accommodate disabled people, unless it would mean changing their business model, because that's a whole lot to ask and it's expensive. And, for years, a lot of big companies could say, we really can't guarantee we're going to have curbside pickup or home delivery or a driver available. That is just not part of our core business model. We don't have the staff, we don't have the infrastructure. But remember, it's 2023, guys. Modern convenience services and every company which has voluntarily added that to their business model now has a different level of responsibility, legally speaking. That may mean sometimes that even when curbside pickup is unavailable for the general public, we are short-staffed, or maybe it's raining and the restaurant usually doesn't bring orders out when it's raining. That might mean that if a business knows it's a matter of accessibility for someone, that they still follow through on making sure that the curbside pickup that was promised gets to the customer. That may mean that when we're short on drivers in the area and someone's requested a ride share and the request has already been submitted, that the company provides additional incentive for drivers to go to that person first, because for them, it's not a matter of convenience, it is a matter of access. Now, the good news is, what I'm proposing here is 100% doable. It's actually pretty simple. So, turns out, companies already have these digital platforms where you are able to do things like update contact info, set a favorite store, and place your order, right? These are essential pieces of the business model. Well, they can integrate accessibility requests into that business model using the digital platforms. So when someone submits a request that complies with the ADA as a reasonable accommodation and says that for me, these services are not just convenience, they're more, they're access, all of a sudden, the company's going to have a higher obligation that would have said, make an accessibility request. Then the company has got this obligation to follow through in a way that really honors the commitment that they've made to that person. And I guess what I want to say standing here is that as a disabled person, I'm really grateful to the companies who have started this accessibility revolution. This has been truly life-changing for me and millions more. But now, I need those companies to look up, to see what they've started, and to join us in ensuring even greater accessibility for decades to come. Oh, and it looks like my food is here. How convenient. I'm gonna go grab that. Thank you guys.